300, 310, 312.16.
That's kind of a good start.
Yes.
Tony Beets arrived in Canada with just $200 in his pocket, yet he built a multi-million-dollar gold mining empire. Today, he is the highest-paid actor on Gold Rush and controls large-scale Yukon mining operations worth millions in equipment, lands, and annual productions.
All right there. Down ahead, down ahead.
But behind that success is a life defined by harsh conditions, constant risk, and relentless reinvestment that keep the operation running. How does a broke immigrant end up controlling millions of dollars in gold mining operations? And how has he sustained that wealth in such a volatile industry? Join us as we unravel the untold stories behind the rich and luxurious lifestyle of Tony Beets from Gold Rush. From broke immigrant to gold king, Tony Beets has a net worth estimated between $15 million and $24 million, built through decades of relentless work in the Yukon goldfields. However, long before the gold, the television fame, and the multi-million-dollar mining empire, he was just a farm kid growing up in the Netherlands. Life was hard from the start. His father owned 52 dairy cows, and every member of the family was expected to work. By the time Tony was 5 years old, he was already waking up before sunrise to help milk cows. While most children were thinking about school, Tony was cleaning stalls, hauling hay, and dealing with the daily demands of farm life. His family lived in a modest 89-square-meter home. At one point, Tony shared a bed with his brothers until he was 14. As if that wasn't enough, money was always tight. During good seasons, the farm produced about 847 liters of milk per day. But after expenses were paid, the family often had little left to show for all the work. Those early years shaped the person he became today. Tony learned that if something broke, you fixed it yourself. As a teenager, he developed an unusual talent for machinery. He could listen to an engine and often tell what was wrong before anyone else. While other kids were spending time with friends, he was operating tractors and repairing equipment around the farm. At 16, he met Minnie, the girl who eventually became his wife and business partner. Their relationship was not exactly welcomed. Their families had a long-standing feud, forcing the young couple to meet in secret. Despite the obstacles, they quickly became inseparable and began dreaming about a different future. By the late 1970s, Tony had reached a difficult conclusion. Farming was not going to give him the life he wanted. The numbers simply did not add up. After all the work was done and expenses were paid, the profits made from farming were painfully small. So in 1980, Tony and Minnie got married, packed their bags, and left for Canada. They arrived with little money, spoke no English, and had no guarantee that things would get better. Their first stop was British Columbia, where both found work on a farm and did other manual labor jobs. The conditions were miserable, and he earned $4 per hour. Tony spent long hours in dark, windowless buildings filled with the smell of compost and ammonia. The couple lived in a cold basement apartment and often slept wearing winter coats. At times, it felt as though the dream was slipping away before it had even begun. Then life took another drastic turn. With only a few $100s left, Tony headed north toward Dawson City after hearing about the massive earning potential up north. He drove an aging pickup truck along the Alaska Highway, fixing breakdowns as they happened in the Klondike region. However, in the early 1980s, he moved to Yukon, where he began working at a gold mining company. By the time he arrived, he knew almost nothing about gold mining. What he did know was machinery, but he was able to settle down because of his ability to operate and repair heavy equipment. During one breakdown, he repaired a critical excavator using parts scavenged from abandoned machines. The fix reportedly saved a mining season worth thousands of dollars. The road ahead remained difficult, but every setback taught him a lesson, and with each season, Tony Beets moved a little further away from the struggling immigrant who arrived in Canada with almost nothing and a little closer to becoming one of the most successful gold miners in the Yukon. What started as survival slowly turned into control over entire stretches of land in the Yukon. The empire beneath the Yukon.
The guy didn't just show up to be a laborer or a rock truck driver or whatever. I mean, there's no use staying our way, but you got to get out on top.
By the time Tony Beets reached his early 30s, he was no longer just another miner trying to survive the Yukon. He was already building something larger, something that eventually became a full-scale mining empire spanning some of the harshest lands in Canada. As he continued building, he made one of his most important moves by purchasing Tamarack Inc. It was not a simple career upgrade, but a full commitment to ownership, risk, and control. The deal came with mining claims across roughly 500 acres and about 10 separate sites, a scale that immediately placed him in a different class of operator. Tony began acquiring additional mining claims across the Yukon during a time when many smaller miners were exiting the industry. He saw value where others saw risk. Claims that were being sold cheaply due to low gold prices became part of his long-term strategy. Over time, Tamarack grew into one of the most active and aggressive mining operations in the region. One of the key turning points came when he took control of Scribner Creek, which he leases out to other famous miners like Parker Schnabel for a major cut of their gold. He poured significant money into upgrading the wash plant, improving recovery systems, and pushing output beyond what the site had previously produced. Early results showed promise, with gold yields reaching hundreds of ounces worth over $100,000. Tony later leased Paradise Hill, investing heavily in large-scale equipment and processing systems. The goal was simple: increase volume and recover more gold per season. At the same time, he expanded into Indian River claims, where he experimented with new extraction techniques, including high-pressure water systems designed to break through frozen ground layers. This period marked the real transformation of Tamarack from a single operation into a network of sites operating simultaneously. To support that scale, he built infrastructure that most miners never attempted. From roads to water systems to recycling setups, everything was designed for one purpose: continuous mining, regardless of weather or ground conditions. But nothing about the Yukon stays stable for long. Floods regularly threatened entire seasons of work. Inside the camps, workforce management became just as challenging as the ground itself. After incidents of sabotage from workers who damaged equipment and disrupted operations, Tony shifted heavily toward family involvement. Minnie stepped into financial management, tracking budgets that reached millions of dollars per season. His children also began taking on operational roles, running heavy machines and managing parts of the mining process. Despite the chaos, production continued to grow. Tamarack eventually expanded into hundreds of mining claims across the Yukon, building a footprint that stretched across multiple high-yield zones. As the years passed, the operation became one of the most recognized mining setups featured on Gold Rush. What made it stand out was not just the operational scale, but the persistence behind it. Every expansion came with risk, every season with loss. But through it all, the output remained consistently high. As the Yukon operation grew into a multi-site empire pulling in millions each season, it was only a matter of time before the work stopped being local and started drawing attention far beyond the mining fields. Gold Rush's highest earner. Long before Gold Rush ever began, Tony Beets was already fully committed to mining in the Yukon. His work had expanded into large-scale operations, multiple claims, and constant seasonal production. His visibility in the mining community eventually brought television crews closer to his world. When Gold Rush began documenting Yukon mining, it was not searching for personalities in studios or controlled environments. It was following real crews working on real ground, and Tony's operation stood out simply because of its scale and intensity. He was not introduced as a performer. He was found in the middle of active mining work that was already running at full pressure. Tony Beets did not enter Gold Rush as a headline name. When he first appeared on the series in its early seasons, he was not positioned as the face of anything. He was just another miner in a lineup of crews trying to extract gold from difficult ground. At the start, his role was small, limited screen time, short appearances, and no expectation that he would become a central figure. He was introduced in Season 2 simply as an experienced local Klondike miner who advised Todd Hoffman on drilling test holes. He only appeared occasionally as a mentor or landlord before becoming a full-time regular cast member in Season 5. But that changed quickly once his presence became impossible to ignore. What stood out was not polished storytelling or scripted moments, but how direct he was. He spoke plainly and reacted sharply when things went wrong, and that blunt style began to pull attention. As the seasons continued, his screen time increased. What was once background footage turned into full segments focused on his crew and operations. His name began appearing more frequently in discussions about the show, and his segments became among the most watched parts of each season. Tony Beets started on Gold Rush with modest earnings, reportedly around $10,000 per episode in his early appearances. At that stage, he was not among the top-paid names on the show, and his compensation reflected a supporting position within the broader cast. As the series grew in popularity and his screen presence expanded, his pay structure increased significantly. By later seasons, his per-episode earnings had climbed to around $15,000 per episode, marking a clear step up in value as his segments drew stronger audience attention. By 2014, his earnings were reported at approximately $25,000 per episode, placing him among the higher-paid individuals on the Discovery Channel's roster at the time. In addition to episode fees, he also received performance-based bonuses tied to strong mining seasons and high production output. These bonuses pushed his total annual television income even higher during peak seasons. Outside the main series, appearances in spin-off productions such as Gold Rush, The Dirt added additional income streams, further increasing his total earnings from the franchise. By the time the show reached global mainstream success, Tony Beets had become one of the highest earners on Gold Rush, with total yearly television income estimated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range, depending on season output and bonuses. His earnings stood out not just because of the amounts involved, but because of how consistently they increased across seasons. Now, with television earnings climbing into the hundreds of thousands and mining income running into millions each season, the real question was no longer how much he made, but where all that money actually went. Spending a fortune. For someone with millions flowing through his operations, Tony Beets does not live as most people would expect. His spending pattern is not built around luxury for show. It is shaped by seasons, pressure, and constant reinvestment into the work that made him rich in the first place. When the mining season is active, his lifestyle becomes extremely simple. He is often based deep in the Yukon, close to active sites where production is happening. Basic camp setups, shared spaces, and long working days define that period. Even with his financial success, he is known to sleep in plain accommodations close to work, sometimes with little more than what he needs to get through the day and return to the field. But outside the mining season, the contrast is sharp. Tony owns residential property in the Yukon, but he also maintains a completely different lifestyle when he steps away from the cold. One of his most well-known personal retreats is an oceanfront condo in Mexico. It is where he spends part of the off-season, away from frozen ground and constant mechanical pressure. However, Tony does not limit himself to a single property. Over time, he has built additional real estate holdings and investments beyond mining. These assets form a secondary layer of stability, independent of the unpredictable nature of gold extraction. Alongside property, he invests in financial instruments, diversifying beyond equipment and ground-based operations. Still, the most consistent pattern in how he uses money is reinvestment. A large portion of what comes in from mining does not stay idle. It goes back into the operation. Equipment upgrades, repairs, expansions, and infrastructure improvements take priority. New machines are introduced when needed. Older ones are pushed further when possible. Entire systems are adjusted or rebuilt to keep production moving without interruption. His most significant investment came in 2015 when he purchased the Viking dredge, a piece of equipment worth $1 million. This reinvestment mindset is one of the reasons the operation continues to scale, and it has become a centerpiece of his mining operations. Even after reaching a level of wealth that could support a fully relaxed lifestyle, he continues to make large equipment purchases. In the end, Tony's fortune is not reflected in excess. When the season ends, there is rest, warmth, and distance. When it begins again, everything returns to the same cycle of pressure, machinery, and constant rebuilding. However, beyond the machines, the money, and the seasons of gold, the real measure of his journey is no longer what he built for himself, but what continues to stand after him. The legacy he built.
Mom would have 2 or 3 jobs.
We used to live down the hill. That way Tony didn't have to drive into town and we could see him at the end of the day.
Tony Beets did not build something that could be measured only in gold. What he created was a structure that gradually became a family operation, shaped by years of shared work under some of the toughest conditions in the Yukon. At the center of that structure was Minnie, who continued to play a key role in managing finances and keeping the operation steady. Michael "Cousin Mike" Beets is Tony's nephew and a key member of the Beets mining crew, also featured on Gold Rush. He works primarily at the Paradise Hill and Indian River operations, where he specializes in heavy equipment operation and field maintenance. Over time, Michael has taken on supervisory responsibilities and coordinated the teams during active mining seasons. As time passed, the next generation stepped into the system. Kevin, Monica, and Mike grew into active parts of the operation, each taking on different responsibilities as they gained experience. They did not enter as outsiders learning from scratch. They grew inside the system, working around machines, learning site discipline, and understanding what it meant to keep production running under pressure. Kevin eventually reached a point where he could run operations independently. His work on separate projects showed that the skills passed down were not limited to instruction, but had become practical experience that could stand on its own. Monica also developed into one of the more recognized equipment operators in the Yukon region. Over time, she earned a reputation for handling machines and managing gold rooms, clearing what comes in and out. Mike faced a different path. Early challenges in managing teams and operations tested his position within the business. But over time, he adapted and established himself as a functional part of the operation. And now he oversees Paradise Hill. Through these developments, the operation became more than a single-person effort. It turned into a system designed to continue across generations. Each member learned by being part of the work itself. Outside of the family structure, Tony's reputation in the Yukon mining industry grew in a different direction. He became known for his persistence, especially in situations where operations were constantly disrupted. Over the years, he also faced serious conflicts with regulatory bodies. Environmental regulations, water use restrictions, and inspection issues posed recurring challenges to ongoing operations. One of the most widely known incidents involved the pond fire at a Viking-themed celebration. The situation led to $31,000 in fines and legal penalties issued to both him and his company for violating the territory's Waters Act. It became one of several moments where mining operations collided directly with environmental enforcement. These conflicts did not remain isolated events. They turned into ongoing legal and administrative battles that affected how work could be done on site. At various times, permits were delayed or restricted, and production had to pause or be adjusted under official supervision. Throughout these challenges, he remained outspoken about government oversight, often expressing frustration over restrictions he believed made mining more difficult for working operations. Despite these conflicts, his influence within modern Yukon gold mining continued to grow. Over time, what he built extended beyond television recognition. It became a long-running presence in the Yukon mining landscape, shaped by family involvement, operational scale, and a consistent ability to continue production through difficult conditions. Today, he is still seen as one of the defining figures in gold rush history. Not because of a single moment or achievement, but because of the sustained system that continued to function across decades, seasons, and generations. Do you think Tony Beets' mining empire will last beyond him? Or will it fade once his direct control is gone? And was his rise built more on calculated strategy or on raw survival instinct in one of the toughest industries in the world? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.